The Bay sighed. I had to leave my daydreaming behind or I would be late. I reluctantly finished my coffee, picked up my purse, and left for work. I would have to associate with my fantasy subject there. Bradley Stone was his real name, but everyone just called him Stony. It was an appropriate nickname. He was really cut from a granite block and given life by a Greek god's breath. To put it simply, he was the most beautiful man I had ever seen. I understand that beauty is subjective, as they say, but it wasn't just my opinion, not by a long shot. When any of the office girls got together, he was pretty much the talk of the town. The other day, I overheard Betty boasting in the lunchroom, telling the other females that he had smiled at her made her utterly ecstatic. Kathy attempted to outdo him by claiming he was leaning over her shoulder to inspect something on her computer screen and that he had his hand on the back of her chair. Sometimes, after simply speaking with him, I would catch myself looking down to see if he had drooled. I suppose that everyone has fantasies. I was utterly smitten with Sean Connery during my high school years. It would have taken only a moment for me to drop my underwear for him. That's normal for teenagers whose hormones are out of control. Indeed, we all harbored crushes on someone back then, but things were meant to be different now. We were grown-ups. Was it typical to still be infatuated? I'm Langley, and I've been the devoted wife of the greatest husband a wife could ask for the last 16 years. We are raising our lovely kid together. She is a real gift from heaven, a sophomore in high school. Yes, I am aware. Is it okay for me to fantasize about another man? Not at all, but I'm unable to stop myself. All it takes for me to get stimulated between my legs is for me to catch a glimpse of him as he passes by my office door. Stoney moved from California to the Chicago office around 7 months ago, and since then, we have been working together. I shook his hand and smiled when I first met him. I was so afraid that if I spoke, I would say something like, "Hey, wanna have some fun?" As luck would have it, I was chosen by the upper management to give him a tour during his first week. I made an effort to ignore his appearance. I focused on handling him just like any other coworker. In any case, it was effective for a while. Then, one evening, I made the absurd decision to play Stoney and assume Nelson was having a particularly passionate make-out session. My dream started from that, which is why I should never have done it, and they're becoming worse. I now have fantasies about Stoney before and after their bonding, as well as before and after they sleep together. It's surprising that in my ardor, I haven't cried out his name. Luckily, I've never done it, and I take care to ensure that it stays that way. However, I'm a little surprised that my devoted hubby hasn't noticed my remorse following our romantic outings. Ultimately, what I'm doing is an act of adultery. I've made an attempt to erase my guilt by persuading myself that what I do is merely role-playing. Hell, it's a common way for people to add a little spice to things. Naturally, I am deluding myself, and I am aware of it. Only when both participants are aware of what is happening and act it out with one another can it be considered role-playing. Nelson is clueless. I had considered confessing a time back in an attempt to clear my conscience. Then that concept turned into what may have been the worst, most devastating idea I have ever had. I thought of asking Nelson if I could have a one-night stand, a free pass. Nelson is, as I mentioned earlier, as ideal a husband as they come. Although he doesn't have a huge income, he makes a solid livelihood and spends nearly all of his nights at home with his family. He is passionate, kind, attentive, patient, and loving. He is extremely trustworthy and honest. He instills in our daughter the value of morality by leading by example and demonstrating his strong moral principles. I wonder how I could even consider hurting a man of his caliber, even when I consider all of his wonderful attributes. I'm not a moron. I am aware he would be crushed if I asked for a free pass. Additionally, I am aware that it would harm, if not completely end, our marriage and relationship. To do something like that, any woman would need to have the intelligence of an Amba. No, that's not my intelligence at all. I am aware that maintaining complete and utter secrecy would be essential if I were to ever sleep with Stoney. Nobody could ever know, nobody, apart from him and me, of course. I could not bear the smallest, tiniest possibility that Nelson would find out. Upon arriving at our office complex's parking lot, I inhaled deeply, bracing myself for yet another day of self-loathing. I had to quit torturing myself in this way. He may be stunning, but at the end of the day, he's simply a man. He's just a man, I have to remind myself, a man with iridescent blue eyes that pierce your very soul and thick, wavy, raven black hair. A man with a squared-off jaw, deep dimples, powerful cheekbones, and a cleft in the middle of his chin. Yes, only a man, but what a man, broad shoulders and a body crafted by Fisher, indeed. Good grief, I chastised myself. Here I was again. At times, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Of course, there are moments when my fantasies about Stoney's bed don't come true. Rather, I attempt to devise strategies for securely putting him in the sack. He's undoubtedly as intrigued as I am. I've learned the difference between harmless flirtation and saying anytime you want it, baby, and Stoney definitely fits into the latter category. I've been a good-looking lady my entire life. No, making sure no one finds out about it is the issue, not getting him into bed. I could remember being able to enter the elevator and push the button for the 9th floor without experiencing a spike in my blood pressure or a beating in my heart. The orderly chaos of the busy office would calm me down when the doors opened and get me through another day. I went straight to the executive coffee room, the one with actual coffee, not that awful machine stuff, as soon as I could. Yes, I had climbed the corporate ladder far enough to be entitled to a decent cup of coffee. I claimed I wasn't a moron. My phone rang as I was ready to take a sip of my coffee after wandering over to my desk. Hello. Good morning, Langley. It was Mr. Johnson, one of my direct supervisors and a vice president. After exchanging a few pleasantries, I said good morning, and he asked me to come to his office. Though I wondered what it was all about, I didn't think I was in any danger. Have a seat, Langley. Oh no, I sensed a problem. Johnson typically just asks you to stand in front of his desk, tells you what he needs, and then walks away. He doesn't usually ask people to sit down. Langley, I would like a little vacation. A vacation? Not really, Mr. Johnson. My vacation is scheduled for August. We already have a family trip all planned. Well, this is more like a working vacation, although there's no real work involved. Corporate is having a seminar on international management techniques next week. All the offices have to send 2 representatives. I had slated Baker to go, but the blooming idiot got up in the middle of the night, fell down the stairs, and broke his leg. Oh my gosh, is he going to be okay? Yeah, but he'll be out of commission for a while. He sure can't get on a plane right now. What about it? I really need you to go. The flight leaves Sunday night at 6:40. You have reservations at the Manhattan Hilton. It's right down the street from Times Square and 3 blocks from corporate headquarters. They're having the seminars in one of the large banquet rooms on the main floor. It's only for 3 days. Your return flight is Wednesday night. Well, I guess I don't really have a choice, do I? Not really. I stood up and said, okay, where are the tickets? Johnson answered, right here, taking them out of his desk drawer. I really appreciate this, Langley. I'll figure out some way to repay you when you get back, maybe put you up for a romantic weekend with Nelson somewhere. I said, I'll take you up on that. I had just arrived at the threshold when an idea struck me. Mr. Johnson, you said 2 people from each office. Who else will be there? Stoney, but he won't be on the same plane. He's heading out Surrey. He wants to knock around New York over the weekend. Mr. Johnson said Stoney's name, and my knees almost buckled. I had the one and only opportunity to turn my dreams into reality, 3 nights in New York with Stoney, but it seemed too wonderful to be true. Even before I returned to my desk, I could feel the dampness between my legs. My mind was racing. It's actually going to happen, and Nelson won't have any idea. For the remainder of the day, I had a very difficult time stopping my thoughts from wandering. I continued going back and forth between telling Nelson about the trip and my dreams. He had never met Stoney, so I didn't have to worry about him being envious or suspicious. In fact, he trusted me completely. However, since I don't travel much, I had to be careful not to seem very pleased when I informed him. I was attempting to determine the appropriate level of righteous wrath to exhibit for the brief notification. While I didn't want to overdo it, I also didn't want him to think that I was content to go. I had to act composed. Nelson had beat me home when I parked into our driveway. That's what he does occasionally. I was still on cloud 9 as I turned off the ignition. I calmed down by taking a long breath and went inside. I exclaimed, something smells good. Obviously, my darling hubby had already begun dinner. From the kitchen, I heard, hello, hon. I saw the pork roast in the fridge when I got home and figured it was planned for dinner, so I thought I'd give it some attention. I cut up some carrots and potatoes to go with it. I hope that's okay. That's ideal. I planted a kiss on his forehead. Where's Evie? Upstairs doing homework. She got quite a bit this weekend, poor kid. There's never a better time than now to break the awful news to your sweetie. Nelson appeared worried right away. What? It's nothing that bad, honey, nothing to worry about. I have to go out of town next week, that's all. I have to leave Sunday night. I'll be back Wednesday night. How come? That's awful short notice, isn't it? Yes, it is, but I'm afraid it can't be helped. Corporate's having some kind of a training seminar. Mr. Johnson already had Dwight scheduled to go, but he had an accident last night and broke his leg. I'm the next most feasible candidate, I'm afraid. I guess that's what I get for marrying a woman with brains as well as beauty. He grinned. That was both a reason for a smile and another kiss. I was incredibly fortunate to win the marriage lottery. I took my time, letting our lips dance for a bit. As we took a breather, I said to him, of course you realize there is a silver lining in all of this. And that would be. I tried to sound as sexy as I could, but I lowered my voice because I knew Evie couldn't hear us. I am going to sleep you into a coma, said a night. Nelson grinned more broadly. You think if I talked to your boss he could send you out of town more often? I punched his arm in jest. Never you mind. We shared another kiss, and then I gave him a quick lip smack and touched his chest with my left hand. I truly was becoming turned on, so I had to either change the subject or bend over the kitchen table. I just might start saying my goodbyes tonight. I felt that it would be safer to change the topic while Evie was inside the house. Now go call your daughter while I set the table, big boy. Come on. Oh, I've already given Mom a call to see if she could watch the kids till you get home the following week. She stated there would be no issues, but she had to depart as soon as you arrived home. All right, good. We'll be all right, so don't worry about us. I know you will, darling. I knew he was capable as a husband and parent as well. Later that night, I had an enormous need, whether it was love or remorse, to tell Nelson how much I loved him. He didn't know it, of course, but I was going to tell him that, even though I was going to cheat on him, he was my one and only love. Like a tigress, I crept up to his developing manhood by slinking into the bed from the foot. I really wanted it to be all about Nelson, but I couldn't help but worry if Stoney would feel as nice or if he would be roughly the same size. We lay together with his arm around me after more than 2 hours, 2 more climaxes for him and countless more for me, and then we were both exhausted. I felt bad again for all the times Stoney wandered in and out of our bed while we were making love. It was always a competition to see who would be my last thought before sleep took over for the night, Stoney or Nelson, and to be honest, I can't remember who won that night. On a typical Saturday, Nelson mowed the grass while I went grocery shopping. We told Evie about our vacation, and I cautioned her to be kind to her father. Nelson was determined on Saturday night to repay me for the previous evening. Unknowing how long I lay there with my eyes closed, feeling the sensations begin to fade, I flung my arms around Nelson's neck and pulled him down for a kiss, and when I opened them, he was smiling lovingly at me, knowing he gave me pleasure. I closed my eyes, but felt his hands dig into the mattress on either side of my head, bracing himself above me, then gently pushing, initiating a slow, rhythmic beat. I felt him kiss my cheek before he thrust more forcefully. Soon, I was seeing stars once more, and Nelson understood precisely how my body responded, so he slowed down without stopping altogether. Soon, he was driving into me once more, much more forcefully. Once more, as we lay wrapped in each other's arms, I considered my impending event. I was sure Stoney had more experience than Nelson, but I figured I'd find out soon enough, so I didn't think too much about it. Nelson wasn't even close to being as attractive as Stoney. Hell, not many men were, but does attractiveness equate to bonding? My kind husband treated his 2 favorite women to breakfast on Sunday morning. Afterward, we rode into the city and spent the day at the Lincoln Park Zoo. When it came time to pack, I had a great day and had not once thought of Stoney until I had to shove my prettiest lace bra and panty set under the rest of my clothes. And I had some cash on me that Nelson wasn't aware. So maybe when I got time I could buy something pretty in New York, and it would be neat if I could buy something reasonably priced that Stoney could just tear from my body. Oh God, just thinking about it had me fantasizing in the bathroom. I was going to drive myself to the airport, but Nelson offered to drive us since Evie wanted to see my plane take off. They escorted me to the security checkpoint, where I gave them both a farewell kiss and told them I would see them on Wednesday night. I felt like I was leaving one world behind as I approached the security area and entering another, the world of work, family, responsibility, accountability, and common sense, the world of freedom, exemption, immaturity, wild abandonment, and yes, infidelity. When I got to the TSA, I was afraid they would misinterpret my nervousness for nervousness and give me a hard time, but everything went smoothly. When we took off, I stretched back and tried to get as comfortable as I could. I closed my eyes and felt a smile coming on as I started to daydream about having slept with Stoney. Every now and then I had to remind myself where I was so I didn't reach down and start rubbing myself. I wondered if either of the men could smell me. Maybe one of them would give me a hand. Literally, the man to my right, in the window seat, had his laptop and I guessed him for being a businessman. The guy in the aisle seat was older, much older, and I figured he was on his way to visit his kids or something. I heard one of the workers ordering everyone to get back into their upright seats around the time I thought about using the restroom to relieve myself. I was in shock that we were actually there. I had spent the whole journey dreaming about Stoney. God, I really prayed he didn't disappoint. I took a taxi to the Hilton and went up to the young man at the counter who had freckles on his face. I'm Langley Anderson. Hello. For me, you have a reservation. His response was, yes, Ms. Anderson. I have it right here, as he reached for a key card. Placing it on the counter, he began to type on his computer. Do you need help with your bag, ma'am? No, I understand. I'd like to know if Bradley Stone has arrived. The young man made a hasty check. Yes, ma'am. Would you like me to ring his room for you? I almost said yes, but I thought better of it. There's no use in promoting to everyone. You never know who might be hiding there. No, that's okay. I took my key card, signed the check and receipt, and made my way to the elevators. It was almost 11 o'clock in New York time when I made it to my room and started unpacking. Chicago time was 10 at the time. I had to call home and let my husband know I arrived safely before I could do anything else. The second ring registered with him. Hello, gorgeous. I was a little surprised by that. Expecting a call from your girlfriend. He laughed and said, no, expecting a call from my vagrant wife. How did you know it was me? At this hour, who else would call? Actually, for the past 30 minutes, I have been anticipating your call. Everything went well, right? Yes, no issues. It simply took some time to get from the airport to this location. I feel a bit fatigued, so I think I'm already experiencing jet lag. Yes, honey, I'll let you go. Take a nap. He was very charming. As we parted ways, we exchanged I love yous. I yawned as I hung up the phone. I felt so exhausted, I couldn't believe it. I was going to see if Stoney was at the bar, but I was losing my light quickly. Damn it, all that infatuation with Nelson had to be the reason. It seems that neither of us slept well the previous 2 nights. How should one proceed? Definitely not what I wanted to do when I was sleeping with the greatest man on the planet. I yawned once again as I considered my alternatives. I told myself that was it. I'll simply have to wait another night because I've already waited this long. I took a hot shower after unpacking and hanging my clothing. Thinking that I ought to be taking a cold one, I laughed to myself. God, I thought to myself as I struggled to catch my breath, if thinking about it excites me that much, I can't even begin to comprehend how amazing the real thing will be. I didn't even think of poor Nelson that evening. An invading force of longing and lust, named Stoney, took over my fantasies. I went to the coffee shop at the hotel for breakfast the following morning. They served the best eggs Benedict in the world, according to one of the guys from work who had stayed there before. The hostess was approaching me when I noticed an arm coming out from under a table. She said, "Good morning, ma'am," with a warm grin and a thick New York accent. I gestured to the lone arm and remarked, Actually I see a friend back there. Is it okay if I sit with him?" She said, "Of course," and I followed her to the man I've always wanted. I doubt Stoney even noticed the way the attractive young woman made small talk with him. Despite sitting me, she didn't avert her gaze from him. I reasoned that he probably gets so much of that he's not even aware of it anymore. "It seems you've made it," he replied, grinning broadly. "Yeah, I'm a big girl now, in case you didn't notice. I am capable of navigating airports on my own." He came back. "Oh, I see. That's right," the first volley with a bodily meaning. I knew right away that we were in agreement. After that, we continued to have bolder innuendos and double entendres in our discourse. It was agreed upon by the time I finished my eggs Benedict and he finished his steak and eggs. We both knew, without really expressing it, what we were going to do for the next 2 nights. Of course, we sat together at the seminar. I have no idea what the topic of it was. Dreams of what lay ahead of us kept coming to me. I would attempt to relax and pay attention to the guy talking, but Stoney would always reach over and mumble something in my ear. As the conversation went on, the remarks became more offensive. I was hesitant to get out of my chair when we broke for lunch because I thought I would squish from my underwear. Lunch was served from a buffet in the back of the seminar room. As we drew closer, some people from the California office stopped over to greet Stoney, and I was distracted by someone who had relocated from our Chicago office to New Jersey. That was probably a good thing, because I could have thrown the meal on the ground and beaten Stoney up in front of everyone on the table. That's how everything transpired in my dream, anyhow. I was hornier than ever by the time the session ended for the day at 3 o'clock. Stoney and I had a brief drink at one of the hotel's bars. As soon as they served us, he struck up a discussion. "I've been thinking about this ever since I transferred to Chicago." "Have you? Why did you never speak up?" "I am unable to risk it. I adore my spouse and children, but I also occasionally enjoy a weird bit of garbage. I only need to use tremendous caution. My wife, Angie, came dangerously close to me a few years ago. I was having an affair with a cheerleader for the Los Angeles Rams. One day, being a fool, I took her home for a quickie. Naturally, Angie chose that particular day to call in ill to work and leave early. She would have caught me in the act if she had arrived 20 minutes earlier. After that, I went through hell for a while. She seemed suspicious even after I told her I had come home to get something. The cheerleader threatened to report us when I ended our relationship. I was certain that my family would be taken away from me. Although it was obviously untrue, it did teach me to exercise greater caution going forward. It was, to be honest, a little unsettling to hear myself called a strange meat, but I suppose that's what I was. I didn't let it bother me. I really wanted to lie down with this hunk on top of me. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I've been fantasizing about you for the last few months. He grinned and said, "Really? Well, I've never done this before, huh? How does it operate? Do I just go to your room or something?" His smile verged on condescension. "Well, after spending the entire day in that dumb chair, I need to take a shower to feel refreshed. I also need to give Angie a call and finish that off. How about we get together for supper at the restaurant at roughly 6:30? You proceed to your room after that, and I'll spend some time in mine, just to be sure. I'll stop by as soon as I'm certain the coast is clear." "Are you certain? I could wash your back if you were to take a shower, really." That condescending smile reappeared. "Langley, I appreciate your excitement, but the next 2 evenings will be spent together all evening. I need some downtime to unwind and spend time with my wife and children. Furthermore, it's usually preferable to screw on a full stomach. It boosts endurance. I'll stay overnight and make my alarm for 5 o'clock. In this manner, I'll return to my own room ahead of everyone else. How does that sound?" To be honest, I felt a little let down. I questioned whether he realized how nervous I was. I considered telling him that I didn't want to wait that long, but I chose to maintain my modesty and accepted his schedule instead. We retired to our rooms after finishing our beverages. I had to remove my underwear and wash it in the sink first thing in the morning. I undressed and made my way to the unfinished bathroom. The prospect of Stoney seeing me nude in a short while made my entire body tingle. I soaked my underwear with water, wrung it out, and hung it from the shower rod. I made the decision to soak in the tube instead of taking my regular shower. The Hilton Inns of old. On one of the shelves, I noticed a tiny bottle of lavender bath oil. Before slinking in up to my neck, I added the oil and ran a full tube of lovely hot water. It was paradise, oh God. I let my hand wander while I closed my eyes. It was incredibly sensual to feel my slick skin as my fingers found their way home. I arrived with a suppressed cry as soon as I touched my magic button. I soaked till I began to prune, at which point I put on the terracloth robe bearing the Hilton logo and headed for the bed. I fell onto the plush mattress and looked at the time. Just 20 to 5 was the time. God, I thought to myself, there has to be a method to accelerate time. I'll dress and apply cosmetics in approximately 30 minutes. Even so, there's about a half an hour remaining. I have no idea what on earth I was meant to do with that time. I lay there pondering. I took another look at the time, 4:45. Though it was just 3:45 in Chicago, I had a question. Knowing my spouse, I assumed he would leave work early to spend more time with his kid. I thought of phoning the house. I needed to make sure my voice sounded as innocent as possible to Nelson. Hello. Hi, honey, I knew you'd be home already. You did? How did you know? Oh, I just figured you'd want to get in as much father-daughter time as you could since I was out of the way. I laughed. You, my love, are never in the way. He always had the perfect thing to say. Damn, you're so adorable. How did work go? As usual, how is the seminar going? Are you starting daily calisthenics exercises in the parking lot before work? I was aware that my guilt-ridden consciousness was the only source of the confusion. But when Nelson brought up calisthenics, I instantly associated it with bonding and briefly worried about if he was trying to covertly reveal his knowledge of my activities. As soon as the idea crossed my head, though, I realized it wasn't true. All he was doing was bringing up the topic of Japanese labor practices. No, I said, trying not to chuckle, just dull stuff about the psychology of the employer-employee relationship, no calisthenics. He said, ooh, sounds like a ton of fun. Want to talk to Evie? She's right here. Absolutely. Hi, Mom, when are you coming home? I'll be home Wednesday night, honey, miss me? Yeah, I'm having a little boy trouble too, Mom. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. I need to talk to you. All right, honey, please wait until I get home. She muttered, yeah, here comes Dad again, once more. I love you, Mom. We used to play this little game all the time. I love you even more, I answered. My husband and daughter said, we love you more, and simultaneously. I had to chuckle. I'll give it to you, fellas. I'm going to get something to eat because I'm feeling hungry, and then I'll say my goodbyes for the evening and turn in my assignment. Okay, honey. Once more, it was just Nelson's voice. My sweetie, don't work too hard. I cherish you. Honey, I also adore you. Good night. That's when I hung up. I paused to consider how fortunate I was to have such a beautiful family. Naturally, my next thought was to check the time and see how long it would be until Stoney and I were dancing in the bed linens. I had a million different ideas going through my head as I was getting dressed. And Stoney, what about him? What would I do if he shoved me? What am I thinking? Jesus, if he pushes me to do this, that is not who he is. I would threaten to notify his wife if he attempted, but Nelson would find out. I was talking myself out of a panic attack. I told myself to calm down. Dinner, wine, and some lewd banter are all on the menu, and everything will work out just fine. Langley, just relax, go with the flow, and have fun. You've been daydreaming about this for months. Please accept things as they come or take him as he comes, I murmured, chuckling at my own irony. Choosing what to wear came next. We needed to exercise caution. In the hotel were people we knew. I didn't want to seem like I was on a date, but I still wanted to look well for him. All it had to seem like was a dinner party between two coworkers before they retired to their separate rooms for the evening. Oh no, I really wanted to give him the boot. I didn't even have any attractive underwear that he could take off later, except for my one pair of lovely underwear. Well, I reasoned, perhaps it's best this way. We both knew I was very anxious, but I didn't want to come across as such. When I went down the elevator to the foyer, I thought I looked great, but that was about it. Men didn't give me any second looks on my way to the restaurant, for sure. At 6:20, the D came over. Just as I turned to tell him it was a table for two, I noticed Stoney was already seated. Perhaps I wasn't the only one feeling nervous. To tell the truth, I can't even recall what I ate. I was not really listening. I found it difficult to look away from him. He was sitting across the table from me. He looked like a cross between Cary Grant, Tom Cruise, and Sean Connery. I was still in disbelief that it was actually happening. The hour was drawing near. My heart began to beat a little bit quicker. Stoney lowered his voice and whispered, "What room are you in?" 1412. He said, "You have a better view of the city than I do. I'm located on level 9. All right, you get to go first. I do not want anyone to witness me boarding the same elevator as them. Before I go, I'll give you a few minutes. I'm going to spend 10 or 15 minutes in my own room before I go. To save me from having to knock, leave the door slightly ajar." I had to take a glass of water to quench my parched throat before responding to him. Okay. I stood up and went into the lobby. It didn't matter who paid because we shared the same expense account for the vacation. I gave it to him. I was so anxious by the time I returned to my room that I nearly forgot to leave the door slightly open. What now, I wondered. Should I wait in bed for him? Shall I undress to my black lace underwear and bra or go bare? No, I want my clothes undone by him. I want a little romance first, not simply bedtime. I choose to hold off. I looked at my phone and saw that it was 70:20. I was breathing too much, my God. I needed to gather my thoughts. I tried inhaling deeply a few times. I got up and started to walk back and forth. Even for a minute, I needed to distract myself from my thoughts. To make sure the minibar was filled, I strolled up to it. I made sure we had enough martinis by going through the inventory. I attempted to force myself to relax by taking a few more deep breaths. I took another look at my phone and saw 76. This was it, the realization of my dream. I was sweating profusely. In fact, I was perspiring everywhere. I hurried to the restroom to apply more deodorant beneath my arms and touch up my makeup. As I was about to leave, I noticed Stoney softly shutting the door. He turned to face me and grinned while he adjusted the safety lock. At last, he said to himself, I have you all to myself. I would want to ask if you would like a drink. Finally, I sputtered, I can make us a couple martinis. With a later, he drew us closer together. He grabbed my upper arms and drew me into an embrace that felt like my skin was on fire. I felt like I was going to burst with excitement as I stared into those piercing blue eyes. My pulse accelerated and my heart began to race by this point. Every nerve in my body tingled, igniting with passionate bursts. Our lips came together. Our tongues danced and teased each other. My pants were wet with. The room began to spin, and I was starting to feel dizzy. They weren't saturated. Wait. Not only were they dry. That was strange. Just thinking about Stoney made me feel happy. I was bone dry when I was kissing him, setting the stage for a passionate, animalistic, and unrestrained bonding session. How could that have happened? I could hear them saying, I love you more, resounding in my mind at that moment. As clear as day, I could see their image. While I was kissing another man, my husband and daughter were standing there telling me how much they loved me. It resembled a lightning strike. My body was reacting to the fact that I had slept with Stoney, not to the thrill or the expectation of having done so. My nerves weren't burning with passion, rather, they were pointing out how foolish I was behaving. I didn't feel anything since, while fantasies are one thing, cheating is never acceptable. My body was warning me that I was going to commit the biggest mistake of my life. I opened my eyes fast, pressing my hands on Stoney's chest and taking my lips away from his. He had to take a step back to catch himself since I pushed him so hard. His expression told me he was really confused. What's the matter, Stoney? I can't handle this. I have no idea what I was contemplating. This is something you've been dreaming about for months. You yourself told me. It's something that we both desire. All you're feeling is anxiety. Let's have that drink, come on. It will lessen the intensity. That's all, we'll go a little more slowly. I'm going to make it an unforgettable night for you. Stoney, no, really. This is beyond me. I couldn't do it to my spouse. My daughter can't be subjected to such. You're not causing them any harm. They are not going to know. I took great care to ensure that no one could see me. Langley, it's just you and me. Nobody else will ever be aware of this. Stoney, I'd know. I would never be able to face Nelson again. I'm incredibly embarrassed of myself for allowing things to get this far. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when I felt my eyes start to tear up. The thought of how close I came to betraying my husband made my hands shake. Do you not adore your spouse? Avoid. Yes, without a doubt. You know I adore her. That's the reason I'm taking extra caution. It won't harm her, though, what she doesn't know. Wrong. It does hurt her because you lose a little more respect for her every time you do it with somebody else you have to. Well, Langley, you know that's BS. It is absurd to assume that I don't love or respect my wife just because I occasionally pull off a weird outfit. I don't believe that's it. I don't think you really love her. You might enjoy the way she looks or you might love being married to her. Respect cannot be shown to someone you consistently betray. You cannot dispute that you do not respect your marriage vows. And how can you respect the lady you made the vows to if you do not respect yourself? I don't think you can genuinely love someone you don't respect, Stoney, therefore you can't tell me you respect your wife. Langley, you're turning a molehill into a mountain. Despite what you say, I adore Jennifer and she is a wonderful wife and mother. Are you serious? What if she was ever discovered? I could see right away from his expression that he interpreted my query as a threat. No, Stoney, I'm not going to tell your wife, but what if one day someone did happen to see you? Or perhaps someone is drawn to your stunning features and wants to end your marriage in order to have you all to herself. As you mentioned, that nearly happened once. That should have healed you, I would have assumed. If it does occur, just think of how much it will pain your wife and children. He responded, okay, you made your point, and turned to go. He said, you don't want to get together, fine, but don't go making moral judgments on how I live my life, and shut the door. I sat there for quite some time, I don't know how long. I was sobbing intermittently. I considered everyone in my life and what their opinions would be of me if they had known that I had almost slept with another man. Not only would Nelson and Evangeline be sad, but so would my mom, dad, and sister. I'd be considered an immoral woman even by the majority of our friends. I poured myself another drink after crying for a while. I crossed the room and pulled open the curtains on the big floor-to-ceiling window that provided a stunning view of the city below. It was so beautiful, damn it. I could see the Empire State Building reaching for the clouds if I put my cheek up to the glass and brought my face near to it. I was suddenly very alone. My guilt permeated the air, and the walls of the room knew it. My hubby was essential to me. My family was essential to me. I so badly wanted to contact Nelson, but I was scared my voice would be filled with shame and self-loathing. Thank God I didn't bring a good book. I didn't even consider bringing one because I had so many nighttime engagements with Stoney. I closed my eyes, lay down on the bed, and imagined Nelson grinning down at me. "I'm really sorry," I said. "I'm so very, very sorry." I could feel the regret trickling down the side of my face and out of my eyes. I eventually fell asleep on a pillow that was wet. I really didn't want to see Stoney the following morning, so I got out of the hotel and went to the little eatery across the block for breakfast. I deliberately waited for the start of the session before entering and finding a seat near the rear of the space. It seemed that he was as eager to talk to me as I was to talk to him. When we paused for lunch, he didn't even look in my direction. I ate dinner in my room that evening. I'd be home in another day or two. I could feel how much I missed my family and how alone I felt. That's not how I usually am. Generally, I'm rather happy to be alone myself. Of course, I generally think well of myself. Generally speaking, I think well of myself. That was the distinction. At the time, I didn't feel that way. I was ashamed and unclean. By the time I mustered up the nerve to give Nelson a call, it was 9 o'clock. I guess I didn't do too well at pretending to be normal because halfway through our talk, he inquired as to whether anything was wrong. I pretended to be fatigued, which is an age-tested excuse. Before I returned home, I would need to put in a lot of effort to get over my guilt. The next day, Stoney and I had not spoken to each other again. He was waiting for the same flight as me in the lounge when I arrived at the airport. I wondered if I ought to try striking up a conversation. We still had to collaborate, after all. He noticed me when he looked up from what he was reading, but he didn't even grin. I thought, screw it, at that very moment. At work, I'm sure we'll talk. For me, that was sufficient in every way. He was in seat 4 and I was in seat 10C when we boarded. Throughout the whole ride home, my only thought was on how I had let my family down. I thought back to the first time I saw Stoney and how my heart skipped a beat. I remembered all the times I'd acted like Stoney was making out with me rather than Nelson. The more I thought about it, the more guilty I felt once more. I pondered whether or not to confess for the second time. That would harm the guy I love, but it would also ease some of my guilt. Once more, I dismissed the notion out of hand. I looked up as we approached the O'Hare gate, and I saw Stoney take his luggage out of the overhead bin and instantly unbuckle his seatbelt. He was the first who made his way over to the door. When I realized that he wasn't accustomed to being rejected, I realized that he was acting really immaturely when he ignored me. That made me smile, I have to admit. I inhaled deeply as I got ready to see the two most significant individuals in my life. My heart seemed to leap out of my chest when I saw them in the waiting area. Even though it had only been 3 days, it seemed endless. As I accelerated to nearly a run, the wheels of my travel bag groaned on the tiled floor. I did indeed fly into Nelson's powerful arms. In his arms, I felt so secure. I'm not sure how long we kissed, but Evangeline finally broke it off. "Did your mother notice that guy on the plane? Is he a famous actor?" I broke our kiss and acknowledged our daughter, saying, "What, honey? That guy that was on the plane? Honey, I believe it might be time for that conversation. Our daughter is becoming more aware of boys." "Oh, Dad," Evie answered. I believe that Nelson's remark amused us both. "Honey, Evie and I had that talk a long time ago and have had several more since then," I said. He just said, "Oh, nothing else." He seemed a little ashamed, I could tell. "She observed a man stepping off the same aircraft as you." Admittedly, he was an extremely attractive man. Naturally, I immediately recognized the person they were discussing. The human brain can process information incredibly quickly when necessary. I understood right away that I had two choices. I might say to myself, "Oh, that was Stoney," or I could remain silent. I decided not to speak as I thought there was little chance that Nelson and Stoney would ever cross paths. I didn't want to put any thoughts into my husband's brain. "I'm sorry, honey," I hugged my daughter and said. I didn't see any movie stars. After Evie went to sleep later that evening, Nelson and I really did have a sexual encounter. That night, it was just my devoted spouse and I in the room, no one else. I never gave Stoney a second thought. Sometimes the workings of the mind are pretty weird. I could never look at Stoney before New York without fantasizing that he was inside of me. Now that the near accident has brought me back to Earth, I view him with the same level of indifference that I do any male who isn't my spouse. Rather, from being inspired to entertain my own dreams, hearing the secretaries talk about him makes me laugh at how ridiculous they are. It annoys Stoney, I know that. It's evident in his eyes. He sees the one who got away, the one who rejected him, every time he looks at me. I will admit that I was a little proud of that. Mr. Johnson hadn't responded a week after my return, so I jokingly reminded him of his pledge. A few days later, his secretary dropped by my desk bearing a package deal for a romantic weekend getaway at a Galena bed and breakfast. I gave my mother a call right away to ask if she could watch Evie for the weekend. I made the bookings when she informed me that the next weekend was free. I intended for Nelson to be surprised by it. I needed a lot of time to move past my guilt. In fact, I still get a small tingle whenever I think about it, even now. Fortunately, Nelson was unaware of it, and I promised not to damage him before I die knowing my secret. A woman could not ask for a better husband and parent than him. It's my turn to take charge and be the greatest wife and mother possible. My comments: a woman that can keep her fantasy to herself, it is a bit rare these days. People have fantasies all the time, but they get to choose the action they want to pick.